Okay. Well, it's great to be here. It's Uri Schneider. It's been a long time since we've done an episode with Transcending Stuttering. I think we're going to be shifting towards thinking about transcending X. And you'll understand why after this episode. We have a very, very special guest. There are a lot of special guests, but the most special people are the people that I've known for the longest and have taught me the most. So Naomi Zauderer is really, it's great to have you here. And the first time I invited you, you kind of said, I'll think about it. You were excited to do it. You were also hesitant. So I'm so excited we're finally here. What would you, how would you introduce yourself just like professionally, what you're doing now, just to kind of tell everybody? And then we'll talk about, the journey that brought us here.
Yeah, firstly, it's so great to be here. This is wonderful to sit here with you. And if my childhood self knew that I would be doing this, she would think I was really cool right now. Yeah, so right now I am a clinical social worker. I live in Tel Aviv and I see people both here in Israel and in the US. And I specialize in different kinds of therapy. One of those modalities is sensory motor psychotherapy. I'm trained in EMDR, IFS, but we can get into more of the therapy stuff later, perhaps.
And the excuse for us to meet when you were all of 9, 10 years old was that you stutter. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what brings us together. And I find it so interesting that stuttering, which is something that really keeps people sometimes apart, actually brings a lot of people together. And that's how we got to meet each other. Yes. I was the guide, the professional, and you were the client. How would you describe yourself at that age when we met around, middle school, entering junior high school?
Yeah. Wow. Middle school, entering junior high school was a time where I was kind of at the rock bottom of my stuttering journey. It was a really rough time for me. I remember myself being very self-absorbed in my stuttering and my identity as someone who stuttered, really struggled with it. Right, so it was around 11, 12 years old, I think, right? When I first came to see you. It had
to be 10, 11, 12, because then we led up to the bat mitzvah.
Right, okay. So it was, there was perhaps a progression from 10-year-old Naomi to 12-year-old Naomi, although I don't quite remember when that transition happened. But I do remember that when I was with you and speaking to you and sharing about what was going on for me, I was going through a really difficult time in my stuttering journey.
So we didn't meet when you were 5 or 6.
No.
And as you said, there was an evolution of progression. And here you are today as a therapist, helping others process and heal and strengthen. So it's the long view to me is the most interesting thing. And you're a living story, and our relationship is a living story. What were you like as a young girl? Like before this was a big deal? What were you like? What do you remember? What do you think of as identifying with 5, 6, 7 years old?
Yeah. So at that age, I would say 5, 6, 7-year-old Naomi looked very different from 10, 11, 12-year-old Naomi, and then teenage Naomi, actually. I would say that I think of myself at that younger age as being really, I would say kind of confident. I was a funny kid.
Confident.
Yeah. I was warm and loving and friendly, and open. I was a goofball, really open.
You was a goofball.
Yes. That I would say from first to maybe 4th grade, I was like the class clown. I loved to make people laugh. I was a pretty friendly kid. I was chatty. I also really enjoyed bringing other people out. So especially if there was someone who I viewed as being more quiet, I actually really took an interest in them and was kind of interested in bringing them into things, and was kind of just curious to get to know everyone.
That wasn't the Naomi that I met.
No.
How do you remember the Naomi that walked in the door when we met there on Main Street? Yeah.
A much more self-conscious Naomi. It was a time where I became much more aware of my stuttering and how it affected me. I would say at that time, I was much more self-conscious when it came to socially, and then also just in school. And stuttering was a huge part of my identity and what I felt like I really struggled with.
Is there a formative experience or anecdote that stands out for you in terms of what was hard, whether it was at school, at home, with friends?
Yeah. There were definitely a lot of situations in school where I felt like I wanted to be a part of the conversation and I felt like I wasn't able to. Like there was just like a lot of like banter during recess and kids who were just talking a lot and really fast and feeling like I wouldn't be able to get a word in. And then academically, it was really challenging for me because I think that my natural personality is that I like to participate and I like to share. And I got really anxious when I would raise my hand. And it was like all of a sudden I would put my hand up and it would be like thump, 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 thump. And it really made it so difficult for me to participate. I spent a lot of time in school thinking about how I could get out of those speaking situations. So on the first day of school, for example, when the teacher would usually go around the room and have everyone say their name, I would find every reason to be out of the classroom or to have like hurt myself or, oh, I have to go to the nurse, situations like that. And I just spent a lot of time in thinking about avoidance strategies and feeling anxious about exercises where we had to go around the room and give our answer, things like that.
Yeah, we were in a meeting together online, international meeting just recently. Mm-hmm. And the facilitator said, okay, if anybody has questions, raise your hand. And if you don't, we're just going to pick on someone. And I was thinking, yeah, for most people, they don't like that. That doesn't like make people be open and say the best stuff.
Yes.
And then afterwards we spoke about it and you were like, oh yeah, that was like a trigger for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
What do you remember being, I remember you walking into the office and just your body language. People ask like, how can you read somebody? Just look at how they walk in. Are they kind of open? Are they kind of closed? Are they hunched over? I remember you kind of shuffling in, very guarded in your body language. And then look at you now, So I guess what stands out to you in terms of what was unhelpful in your therapy experience? What was really helpful? What are some things that stand out?
Yeah. So I would say what was really helpful for me, starting off with that, was that I just had a space where I could share about my stuttering and my experiences. There weren't many other spaces for me to be able to share what was going on, right? You give the iceberg analogy many times. You could share about that if you'd like to.
The iceberg that, most people just look at what's on top. So, we think about what we see and what we hear and what we can measure and what we can touch. But there's a whole world beneath the surface. And the iceberg, I think about the Titanic. Titanic's coming along and it sinks because it hit an iceberg. It's not like they didn't see the iceberg and they smashed into it. It looked like it was out in the distance. Underwater, the Titanic was very deep and it hit the part of the iceberg beneath the surface. Yep. Not the part that was sticking out. And so often, I think probably we'll get to this, you can shed a lot of light in trauma, but we might touch something. We didn't even see that we touched something. Yeah. But it expands beneath the surface. And so, looking at both what can we see and hear above the surface, but also what's going on beneath the surface. Yeah. There can be really hard stuff, unpleasant stuff. There can also be assets of strength and resilience and determination and creativity, all mixed in. But it's so important that we look not just at the surface behaviors, but also get beneath the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, going to you as a therapist gave me that space to share about what was underneath the iceberg, right? Everybody saw the stuttering, or at least I was really conscious of the stuttering. And as you also talk about with the iceberg, that there's like what is manifest, what everybody sees, right? And maybe from the outside, my stutter wasn't all that bad. I don't remember.
All that good. Like you didn't stutter very well.
Exactly. Thank you.
It wasn't that big. It wasn't that noticeable to other people.
Maybe not. But to me, underneath the iceberg, there was so much. There was so much word switching. There was anxiety about speaking and being able to come and have a place to share about my experiences and being really understood. And you have a great presence and I definitely felt comfortable to share with you. Another thing was that you encouraged me to draw. And I got to know the facts that I really like to draw cartoons. And that was the start of my cartooning journey. And what that really enabled me to do is draw out situations that happened in this like comic strip form and express to you and maybe to my parents, to others, whoever would see this. It was usually just you, my parents maybe, what I was experiencing inside in a way that words couldn't quite articulate. And the experience inside, right, the bottom of that iceberg felt really huge and overwhelming. There's so many emotions going on underneath the surface.
Like what?
Anger and frustration.
Thoughts, feelings?
Right? There's like, this is so frustrating that I just raised my hand to share. And my teacher just moves on to the next person because I'm like, She's like, is anybody else know the answer?
That's the cartoon that you drew then.
Yeah. So there's like anger and frustration. There's shame and embarrassment. There's the anxiety. What happens when I raise my hand? And maybe anticipation, right? There's so much going on underneath the surface that words at that age and generally may not fully encapsulate and describe what the experience is like, right? But I think that there were a few things for me for cartooning. One thing is that it took an experience that was so huge and so overwhelming, and it externalized it, and it made it into something that was kind of really tangible, right? That you can look at the picture and see what happened and get a sense of what I was experiencing inside. So it turned a really overwhelming situation into something that was more like comprehensible and something that I can look at and say, okay, what was happening there for me? And it actually turned something that was like a really anxiety-provoking, overwhelming experience into something that was like cute and pretty and fun and maybe even funny, right? So it like allowed me to change that narrative a little bit too.
Yeah, lifted the weight.
Yeah.
Different way to look at it. And you can't do that through talking all the time.
No.
Especially if talking doesn't come easy.
Right.
I have a disclosure, a full reveal. I shared this in one of the earlier episodes with Greg Pandice. I didn't know what I was doing with that cartooning exercise. I think it was like bouncing around in my head. And I said to myself, I can never do this.
Yeah.
I should never even go there. And I certainly don't draw well. And then what happened was I just went for it. You know, I gave it a go. And I think about had I not gone for it, we never would have gotten all those amazing, you know, pictures. And the prompt I remember, and I saved them. And then when I was cleaning the office out, I then contacted you to share the originals with you, which I think you have. And you recently posted a beautiful blog, and we co-hosted it on our website also about the drawings and about what that did. And one prompt was, draw me a picture. And I even said it was a different girl. It was a girl, Nancy. She's also 10 years old. And Nancy stutters. Just draw me a picture of a scene. And you chose to draw the picture of Nancy or yourself sitting in class, wanting to say what you wanted to say. And then I said, okay, now draw another picture of Nancy, but this Nancy, she doesn't stutter. And then that was kind of like the alternative. And so it gave both an opportunity for you to bring me into and give insight to me and to yourself. What does it look like if like I'm observing myself in this situation that is so unpleasant? Okay, and what would I really want it to look like? What would I want it to be like? What would I wish for? And a lot of that is blocked if we don't do it through some other medium. So you taught me. And since then, I used drawing again and again. And again, I found that the people I did it with draw much better than I do. I wouldn't describe my cartoons as pretty.
And it doesn't matter how pretty they are. Yeah. It still expresses something. Yeah, I recall you pointing out to me in one of the cartoons that I drew that one of the stick figures that I drew just didn't have any emotions on her face. There were no eyes or nose or mouth. And I think in that future drawing, there was an eyes and nose and mouth, right? So like even that itself described something that was huge going on underneath, and just pointing that out to me increased my own awareness.
I think we don't have to be egomaniacs to become self-absorbed with the things that we're caught up with. and they consume so much. They pull us in and they take us out of the life and the relationships and the intimacy that we really want to have. So cool that in the picture of the wish, suddenly there are faces. Now you look people in the face, stand differently. And so those were some helpful things. Other things that stand out as helpful. We can go to the other side.
Yeah.
Helpful experiences that brought you along.
Helpful experiences. Well, there was my bat mitzvah speech, which was a whole thing altogether.
So glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
That's like a core memory for me too.
Yeah.
Your bat mitzvah speech.
Yeah. I'm curious if you want to share anything about what you remember about it or what stands out for you.
I had a lot of anticipation. I was nervous for your bat mitzvah speech. And it wasn't that I was nervous, would you do a good job? But it was more, I wanted to set the stage. And I often tell parents of kids at this transition life cycle event, and it can be in so many things. It could be a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, confirmation, whatever, valedictorian speech. You know, it doesn't have to be the same for every kid. So a person can go through this experience and they can give a big speech. They could also give a speech to a more intimate audience. They could also choose to pre-record it and turn it into a video with animation or with B-roll and all sorts of creative ways. They could also choose not to give a speech. They could do something else, or they could just not give a speech at all. None of these moments are defined by the speech. But in our minds, there's this expectation that it has to be. And so I remember for you and for your family and for so many others, really making it a point for the family, for the parents. Parents will ask me, well, should we make them give the speech? Because if we don't, they'll shy away from giving speeches the rest of their life. Should we give them a pass? Like, this is probably too hard. This is going to be traumatic.
Yeah.
But if we do that, like, and I guess there's no other way, right? And my thing is always like, well, maybe there's another option. One of these creative options, perhaps. So maybe it's not binary. Maybe there's another option. And most importantly, who's the stakeholder that no one asks? The person. Like, what do you want? Like, let's have this back and forth. So you have an opinion. So I don't know how it went for you leading up to the bat mitzvah, but my hope was that the choice that you made to give the speech was your own. I don't know if any of these choices and process kind of were part of your memory of how you got there.
Yeah, I actually don't have, I don't recall, but what I do know is that I think for myself, it was an expectation. It was like, this is what's done. This is what everyone else is doing. This is what my siblings did. And maybe inside there was a feeling of, well, if I don't do this, I would kind of be a disappointment. So I would assume that probably factored into how I made the decision, if I was given the decision, although to be honest, I just don't remember the process. I'd have to do a little
There were
digging.
bigger moments that might have wiped out the memories around it.
Yeah.
What was the memory that you do have of how that day went? Because I was standing there somewhere in the middle of the room, being present, not taking up too much space, but very much attentive and present and rooting for you. What was it like for you getting up there?
Yeah, that memory definitely has a very special place in my mind as being a very difficult, intense, overwhelming one for me as someone who stuttered. It felt really scary to go up there and speak. And I recall before giving the presentation, just those feelings of overwhelm, and I was crying and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. And my dad said to me, you don't need to do this if you don't want to. But I had already made up my mind that I was going to do it. And there was so much fear. The fear was just so disproportional to what was going on. But for me at that time, it was huge. And I remember going up there and looking around and not being able to get out the first word. So much anxiety and a lot of shame, embarrassment in that moment. And I was standing up there. I can't tell you how long it took me to get out that first word. And I was thinking, now everybody knows. those people who I've never spoken to, who didn't know that this was a problem for me, now they know. And what what I do recall is looking across the room and seeing you and knowing that you believed in me, knowing that you had seen me give the speech over and over and over again in your office, practicing for it. And there was something about looking at you and seeing your presence that I actually remember enabled me to start. It was like I saw you and you were smiling, and there was something energetically that I felt that it was, you believe in me and I can do this.
There are people I don't believe in. Just to set the record straight, there's a mirror of sorts. There's something that a person vibes, that you were vibing, that your dad said, you don't have to do this. Now, someone else could have said, thanks, Dad, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But you got up there. I didn't get you up there. Your dad didn't get you up there. You put yourself up there. Now, whether it was driven by all sorts of things, there was something to this day, I think, that you knew you were capable. And as scary and as frightening and as negative as it might be and had been, you kept going for it. And that's what was like the invitation for me to believe in you. I felt like that was the signal that you wanted me to believe you could do it and to keep that flame, to keep that light on for you. And I'm so glad I did.
Me too.
I did. It means a lot. So what were some unhelpful things? And then we can kind of
I don't
through
remember
your experience of other therapy, things that I did, things that you went through otherwise. Because I think it's helpful. What I think is it's empowering for you to share more than I could share. There are paths that are not worth going down. And there are paths that are worth checking out and then being able to say, yeah, this is not for me. But then there are things that are just no-nos. Like no one should have to bear or go through that kind of thing. And I think that there's a feeling of compulsion either that people have for themselves seeking solutions to their challenges, or that people thrust upon people, like, you should really do this. Until you give this a try, you'll never be able to say you didn't. And like, no, thank you. But if everyone's guilting me into it, I guess I'll do it. And I'm just all about like saying like, no, that wasn't good for me. And I wish I hadn't gone down that road. And it doesn't mean it's for everyone, but at least for you.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything that I wish I hadn't gone down that road, but I can tell you that the fluency enhancing techniques that you taught me and that I would practice with you in the office, I don't think I had a lot of spillover to like real life situations. I would practice them at home with my dad. And that was really nice bonding time that I still treasure.
The techniques were not as helpful, didn't have as much carryover, but can you share what you and your dad did? Because it's kind of like the example they say, like whether the therapy was the right therapy or the wrong therapy, we don't know. But sometimes couple therapy works better when it's further distance to travel, because that becomes this interesting factor of having time together. Byproduct? So what was the byproduct of the practicing with your dad?
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a latent benefit.
Right. Well, it's really incredible, but my dad designated a lot of time to sitting with me and practicing the strategies with me, but really it just gave me the opportunity to bond with him and to share with him what was going on with me, what was happening in my day. My dad created this really cute like radio program thing that he called Daddy Naomi Radio.
Wow, and, love that. Daddy Naomi Radio.
He would go, Daddy Naomi Radio. He even had a theme song.
So this is familiar. Like he would sit at one mic, you'd be at the other live.
Yes.
And you thought, and he thought it was like homework to practice talking, but really it was for him to be listening.
Yeah.
It sounds like it became a space. And you said like, it's interesting because when you described coming to meet me, it wasn't about me. It was about having a space. There were so few spaces where you could just say what you were going through. And it sounds like Daddy Naomi Radio show was a bit of that. That is amazing. And that's a big testament to what parents can do, you know,
absolutely.
Even in the hard times when you don't know what to do, but doing something and like creating that little ritual. You said that that's something that stands out, that you remember in a really, really rich way. Very much so. That's amazing. As a person, as a partner, as a parent, I think it's something I can take home.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, my parents paid attention to all of us kids, but I don't know if my siblings got that like really special, sacred time with him like I did, because you encouraged that. And that was a part of my stuttering journey that I'm so grateful for. And yeah.
It's very common that when this work happens well, the siblings start to complain, hey, why don't I get special time? And parents are like, well, what should we do? Like, they didn't come for having a problem. Well, like, no, that's a good problem to have. You should spread it out, and each kid should rotate, and shouldn't be that just this kid gets all this extra time and attention. You should carve out the time for everybody. Yeah. So what happens next? After the bat mitzvah, you pull through, and I remember standing there and rooting for you. I'll share the story I shared with you that a previous teacher of mine, it's amazing. Unbelievable. So she was going to a Catholic school, and she was going to be a salutatorian. She was going to give a speech. And also, like your bat mitzvah, she dreaded it. She wished someone else was the salutatorian. And she invited me for a number of reasons I couldn't go. And there she is starting to give the speech. And like you, she gets stuck on the first word, like so many people. And there's like silence in the cathedral. And all of a sudden a voice comes out and says, come on, Nina, you could do it. And then she has this like breakthrough, and she gives this unbelievable speech, gets a standing ovation, end of the program. She comes back to her mom. She's like, who said that? Was it you? Was it Auntie this? Was it Auntie that? No. To this day, she can't find the angel. She said, come on, Nina, you could do it. And so Nina had that experience. And then I brought that to the bat mitzvah. I said, look, I can't give the speech for you. I can't teach you how to do it flawlessly. I can give you the confidence that you've stood there, you can get through it. You will probably have some bumps along the way, but you also have the strength to get through them.
Yeah.
And then I stood there and I was totally vibing. Come on, Nina, you could do it. I just swapped out Naomi for Nina. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So then you go on, we lose touch for a couple of years. And then you emerge as this incredible therapist, this professional. So like, what drew you and what was important to you, and how did it all come back into your own, informed by your story?
Yeah.
What you went through and what you would have felt you needed.
Yeah. So I do think a really important turning point in my stuttering journey was in 9th grade, when I hit kind of, for me, it was like the rock bottom of stuttering. It was a time where I would say 9th grade, I had a lot of social pressure, a lot of academic pressure. And for me, it all culminated in stuttering. Like that was kind of like the scapegoat of, I can't make friends because I can't speak, and I can't do well academically because I can't participate. And
we haven't spoken about this, but that's something I think about a lot, about scapegoats. Can you talk more about that? What that means in this context? Like basically taking all your problems and pinning them all on this one thing. Yeah. Even though they probably have a lot less to do with that thing, but it's just convenient to throw it all on there.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
It was this one thing that I could identify as being so different from everybody else. I like look around the classroom, I look around my grade in my school, and I'm like, I'm the only one with this thing and I'm feeling really terrible inside. And it's probably because of this thing that I'm feeling so blocked. And the truth was that it really did prevent me from engaging in things. But I also think that I was really focusing on it. I was hyper-focused on the times that I would stutter.
So what does that look like in those years? What's going hard, or what are you holding back from that you really wanted to be doing?
Yeah. Well, I felt
high school's rough for anyone, you know?
I felt like my stuttering was really noticeable, and I felt like I was kind of the weirdo that couldn't say my name, and that may or may not have been true, but that was what I felt. I felt that like
the feeling was true.
Peers,
but whether everyone thought you were a weirdo, jury's out.
Exactly. I felt like peers, people would look at me, and it was annoying to be friends with someone who wasn't able to speak and participate in conversations, or they had to wait longer for me, or I was like kind of just like, what's wrong with you? That was my self-perception. And I also felt like it was getting in the way academically. I felt like if I couldn't participate in school in the way that I wanted to, if I couldn't do the group project and the presentation and raise my hand, it just felt like all encompassing for me because it was something I focused so much on. And actually part of my journey to greater fluency was actually not focusing on stuttering as much.
So, sorry, we're going to just pull that out again. The path that brought you to kind of have less blocks in your speech, to have more flow, was not working on and focusing on the stutter. That's kind of counterintuitive.
Precisely. Yeah. So I'll share with you a bit how I learned this and how this all came about. So I was showing how in ninth grade, it was really the climax of the social pressure and the anxiety around stuttering. And on a day where I felt particularly desperate about my speech. And I actually remember giving an oral presentation that day in Spanish class. And I had the entire presentation memorized. And I went up in front of the class and I was like, just couldn't get it out. And that was also the nature of my stuttering. I wasn't like a stutterer that would kind of say the word again and again or things like that. It was like I just couldn't start and I couldn't get the word out. Really big blocks. So I felt so humiliated. I felt so angry and frustrated. Gosh, I worked so hard on this presentation. I just couldn't do it and I failed it. And that night,
you failed it, or the teacher failed you?
I think the teacher failed me, but it felt like I failed it because the teacher failed me.
It's hard to feel you didn't fail if the teacher gave you enough.
Yeah. And there were more than one presentations like that in those few days where there were like a number of things where I just couldn't do it and failed it. And it felt really frustrating over and over again. And
at that time, was anyone talking to the teachers? Did they know what was going on, or they thought you just didn't prepare?
I don't think I really communicated. Sort of. I think I tried to communicate that I stuttered, but didn't really get much of a response in terms of like helping to change the environment or figure out ways where I could, where I can do something else or not get that, not be penalized essentially for stuttering and not being able to do the presentation. Unfortunately, we just didn't have. I didn't experience that. So on one really difficult day, I went home and I was determined to find something. I was like, I can't live like this anymore. And I did a Google search of how to stop stuttering and start speaking. And I came across all sorts of interesting, weird things. And one thing that I found that was really helpful was a program by this guy named Michael Williams. And his program was how to stop stuttering and start speaking. That's what it was called. And I was like, hey, this looks interesting. It looks more interesting than these like hearing aid looking devices that you put in your ear and like repeats the word after you, or like hypnotherapy or like medication that treats like seizures and stuttering. And those things I thought probably can't get my hands on them right now. So I said, okay, this looks interesting. Let me give it a try. And I started doing his program. It was a lot of cognitive work, and it was, just this person who was a preacher actually, and he had his own journey with stuttering and then came out with some tools and techniques to help other people. And I latched onto it and was taking copious notes. It worked. And it was really, really helpful for me. It was like kind of within 2 months, my speech was like dramatically changed in terms of the fluency that I was experiencing.
It's hard to consolidate, but if you could try, what would be like a point or two that resonated for you that you kind of hooked into?
Yeah. So one of the things were that he shared with us that everyone stutters, actually. Everyone has interruptions in their speech. And what happens for people who stutter, and also I just want to give a caveat. I'm not sharing this as like truth. I'm sharing this as this is what he shared that helped me. And just because it helped me doesn't mean that it would help anybody else. There could be so many things, including a placebo effect, right? So I just want to give that as a caveat.
Disclaimer. Absolutely.
Yes.
And so many of the conversations we've had, we've talked about how there are things that may have been said by me and were picked up very differently by you. And where's the truth? I don't know. They're both truth.
Right.
You know, I had an intention. That's what I said. That's how it landed for you. And that's as true for you as what my intention was for me. And then that's what's so precious about this conversation and so many of our conversations.
Exactly.
So what stuck with you and worked or was helpful for you doesn't mean it's a copy paste for anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. So something that he shared with us is that when we stutter and we focus on it, then we're giving that stuttering incident a lot of significance in our mind. And our brains are basically prediction machines. And if we think, if we're paying a lot of attention to stuttering, then it actually may increase the likelihood in the future of stuttering, right? Because something happens, we're focusing on it, our brain is giving it a lot of credence, and then our brain anticipates and predicts that this will happen again, and then we stutter more. So what he had us do is focus on the times that we speak really smoothly and fluently and with confidence. And then when that happens, he encouraged us to like really celebrate those moments. And what he shared is that when you get really happy or excited about something, there's a dopamine release in your brain. And when that happens, dopamine is actually a really important neurochemical that helps form new neural networks. So the combination of the smooth speech plus the hit of dopamine by going, yes, that was awesome, right? And kind of like hiking yourself up as if like, wow, I did such a great job, creates that rush of dopamine, which leads to kind of like the formation of new neural networks of smooth, fluent speech. And then your brain is more likely to think that that's really significant and starting a new and starts to develop a new pattern in the future. So that was a huge part of it, was just, what was I focusing on? Was I focusing on stuttering? And every time I started going, oh, that was terrible. It was so embarrassing. I hate that, right? Ruminating about it. Or
it's kind of the opposite.
Actually,
it's really like nailing in and hyping in. I'm thinking of it like the little baby shoes. Like if you just leave them, they just age and wither. But some people like put them in bronze, you know, and then like they're for forever. Yeah. And so you take these experiences, often negative ones, you ruminate on them, and it's kind of like giving them this whole like veneer.
Yep.
And if we do that intentionally with the positive experiences, that's so powerful.
Absolutely. So powerful. Absolutely. And as I was saying earlier, my perception as stuttering being a huge part of my identity was that rumination and focusing on it. But if I were to go back to myself as a younger child, I can tell my younger self all the things that she was aside from stuttering, right? That didn't need to be as big a part of my identity as it was in my younger years, but it was because I focused on those things.
I remember when we did the drawings, besides the cartoons of Nancy and Naomi in class, there was also the pizza. And I cut the pizza into 8 slices.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, how many slices of pizza do you know, what are the different things in your life? There was like homework, there was ice skating, there was eating, there was stuttering, there was talking to friends, there was bike riding. You had all these things that were part of your life as a junior high school girl. And you allocated how many slices of the pie were consumed by this thing, kind of like toppings. And I remember, I think you gave stuttering like 2.5 slices at a certain point. And talk about like a great gauge of how big a deal this was for you. And then over time, I remember you turning to me the next time we did it and you said, you know, does it have to be a whole slice? I said, whatever you want. And you're like, I think I'll just make it like a stuffed crust. It kind of touches all the slices, but it doesn't consume the slice. The slice is available for these other activities and interests that are important to me, but I can just put it there. It exists, but it's not overdone. disproportionate.
And that's growth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
And then there were the mushroom pies. Do you remember that?
Hey,
Yep.
Totally.
The mushroom pies that stuttering were like the mushrooms sprinkled on top of the pie, which I loved. I always like mushroom pies. So
Love stuttering.
Right? And so, yeah, it was kind of like a little drizzle of it everywhere.
We were on that same call and somebody said to me, they thought that this analogy was really, really powerful. And it's spot on with what you were talking about.
Yeah, perspective.
Kind
I was
of
just
like,
thinking about that too.
Where's your focus, right? So there's this cool thing, like the camera right now is focused on my face. If it's out of focus, it would be focusing on this plant or this thing behind me, or it would be focused here and I would be blurry. So there's this scene in Patch Adams. You know Patch Adams? You ever watched the movie?
I've heard of it, but I haven't.
Robin Williams, one of his best. So probably more than anything I learned from my father and more than anything I learned from my professional training. Well, I wouldn't say more. I would say after those two, this is the most influential thing I ever learned. And that is Patch Adams has this scene where he's in medical school and he's committed to helping people, not treating problems. And the medical school keeps telling him, stop dealing with the people, just study the books, study the problems, study the solutions, study the treatments. But he doesn't listen to them and it gets him in a lot of trouble. But he goes into this, it was a psych ward, and there's a gentleman there who walks up to everyone quite violently and says, how many fingers do you see? How many fingers do you see? And everyone says 4. And then he kind of curses them out. You idiots. And he says, what's up with this guy? Oh, he used to be this advanced mathematician, but he's clearly lost it. Patch Adams says, must be something to it. Must be something to it. So he goes to his room and he finds a way to engage the man. He says, I just wanted to ask you, what's the answer to the riddle? And he says, oh, you're just another one of those idiots. He says, no, I realize it's got to be, tell me, what is it? And he sees that as the man is working on like advanced mathematics, like E equals MC squared kind of stuff, he's got a teacup, a paper teacup, and it's dripping. And Patch Adams takes a little piece of tape and he puts a tape and he solves the problem with the leak. And he puts down the cup and the man sees that he's not focused on the problem. He doesn't just see a cranky old man. He really wants to know, what is it? So he says, you want to know the problem? So he turns his chair and he says, how many fingers do you see? And Patch Adams says 4. And then he puts his hand up, Naomi, and he says, like, don't look at the fingers, look at me. And if you put your focus, like the camera on me, if you put your focus on me, the 4 fingers become 8 fingers. You stop seeing the fingers and focusing on the fingers, you look beyond the fingers. And he says, that's the thing. When you focus on the problem, all you see is the problem. And you lose sight of what you really want on the other side. So love that. And I think that's such a relevant thing for all of us to think about. All of us got problems, whether it's in our lives or whether it's all around us. If we just focus on the problems, that's all we see. We've got to focus on what's beyond the problem, and then we'll start to see solutions, even if the problem is still there. And then it starts to melt away a bit, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yep. Who are you beyond this problem?
Forget it. So Naomi becomes a clinical social worker. What in the world? How'd that happen? What draw you to that? And how did you kind of find your footing there?
So I would say naturally having made this really huge shift in the way that I spoke, just to kind of like backtrack for a moment and like the impact on that for me.
I'm just the guide, but I'm in the back seat, you know? You're in the driver's seat.
Thanks. So that was really huge to see that kind of like dramatic shift in my speech. For me, felt miraculous, felt like the biggest deal of my life, and felt like it just opened up tremendous possibilities for me.
How old are you? What's the memory?
I was in 9th grade when I just started seeing like really, really dramatic changes. And I was the only one seeing these changes. It was friends were commenting on it. My family noticed.
So we don't know if they thought of you as the weirdo before, but we know they started noticing something's opening up with Naomi. Something's opening up. What kind of things did they notice, or what feedback do you remember? Was it like, oh, wow, your speech is so mellifluous?
They didn't use that word, but they said like, wow, you're speaking really fluently. I got comments from my family members, from friends. Friends would comment that I was just really confident. That I was confident and I was really like kind of like happy and positive.
Sounds like the class clown.
Yes.
recovering
that
some of that.
Younger self was definitely coming online, was starting to come back. Yeah. And that really was a huge part of that was like this work that I was doing in the Michael Williams program, and exactly what you said, focusing on myself as a whole person and who I was and paying attention, having that self-awareness. Exactly. Who are you as a friend? Who are you aside from stuttering? And that gave me tremendous confidence. And I can look back at myself in high school and be like, whoa, I was kind of at like the peak of like the most confident place in my life because I was really in it and I was working on it. And it was felt. If you ask other people who went to high school with me, they would be able to tell you that like, wow, she was a confident kid.
I want to stop you.
Yeah.
It could be go for it or you could say pass, but I think it's quite significant that some of the comments you got, I'm not interested in the people that said it, but more the comments. Wow, you're speaking, it's flowing. Your speech is flowing. And the other comment was, wow, she's so confident. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
Or you saying Naomi was coming back online. Naomi was back. There was no more like shell of Naomi trying to just survive.
Yep.
You were back.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? And which do you connect to? Like back then and now? Like what did you feel when people said it then? Oh wow, you're speaking smooth. Or, oh wow, you seem so confident. Did it hit you different then? Does it hit you different now?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, it definitely hits me different now. And when you frame it in that way, I'm thinking that the latter definitely speaks to me more. And I also remember at that time feeling really good that friends and people around me noticed that I was confident and that I was positive, that I was happy, and I was able to be myself.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So then 9th grade, you're not yet in social work school.
Yes. But I definitely learned there was a lot that I learned in the realm of psychology, in the realm of our minds, and kind of like the power of what changing our thoughts can do. That opened my mind to the world of psychology. And I was also very aware that or at least I felt like I had access to like a certain like secret knowledge base that maybe other people didn't have because they didn't have the same struggles that I had, and they hadn't worked on their confidence.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I had access to some secret knowledge other people didn't have because
I had stuttered and because I had worked on this. Yeah.
So the adversity unlocked something for you that became an asset that you felt other people might not have access to.
Yeah.
Profound.
Yeah. It was pretty obvious to me when I was in high school that there were just things that I had learned about like the human minds and what we're capable of. To experience such a dramatic shift inside of myself was like, whoa, how did I do that? How is that even possible? How did I change my thoughts and change what I was focusing on? And that changed my personhood. Like that was just mind-blowing for me. And it really increased my awareness of how powerful psychology and just like self-work can be. So I would say that was my first like intro into the world of psychology from like a first person experience.
Unbelievable. And your experience is not unique in the sense that it's not just you that had this unbelievably powerful experience and a feeling of wanting to share it.
Yeah.
We're recording this in January 2025. And there's this unbelievable story of a person that reached out January 2024. He was at rock bottom. He said, this thing is wrecking my life. Emailed me at 1 a.m. He had a very prestigious position. And now in January 2025, he's now the director of digital content at the White House. So like from one end to the next, from wrecking my life to becoming like the top of my game, and wanting to share that, not being, not worrying about that. It's amazing.
It's huge. It's huge. When you experience a shift like that inside of yourself, there's just this feeling like anything in the world is possible. Like, whoa, if I went from there to there, then like life is an open door, right? There's like so many possibilities for me. And that itself gave me such hopefulness and like confidence. So
what are like top points that you find you're able to bring into the work you do with people to help them get through things, process things, and get to the other side, in the professional work that you do, informed by this incredibly powerful, inspiring personal experience?
Yeah. So I would say that I had this incredible experience in high school, and this experience carried me through. And then just to give a little bit more about the journey, there was a sense of wanting to become a speech therapist and wanting to help others who stuttered. And in that process, I was in undergrad and went for a bachelor's in communication sciences and disorders. It was really like a last minute switch that I decided that I wanted to help people who stuttered from more of like a psychological perspective, and took that route instead. And what I realized kind of as a continuation from the work that I was doing, that I had shifted a lot cognitively in my confidence and my hopefulness. But maybe what I hadn't focused on as much were the beliefs that I had learned about myself because of my stuttering and because of what my environment around me taught me essentially about myself, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me, but if you could give it like some meat, meaning like what was a belief that had kind of taken shape over those formative years, and then how did it evolve? Shift.
Great. So what I realized is that even though externally I was projecting a lot of confidence and I was speaking smoothly, I was still carrying around a lot of shame inside. And that was like this old shame that I had because I felt really embarrassed over and over and over again as a child. And instead of feeling like, oh, stuttering is embarrassing, when that happens over and over and over again, there's this sense of like, I myself am an embarrassment, or like I'm shameful, or situations like friends, peers, classmates cutting me off a lot when I would try to speak as a child, kind of forms a belief inside that unless I speak smoothly or fluently, I won't be heard, or my words don't matter unless I'm speaking in a smooth way. So what I didn't really realize until a little bit later, like post high school, was that there were so many beliefs about myself, such as if I don't speak smoothly, then people won't want to listen to me. My words don't matter, or like I'm an embarrassment, I'm shameful. Things like that. And I have then kind of done my own work and being able to help myself heal from those self-limiting beliefs. So I would say a lot of the work that I do now is with a modality that's called sensory motor psychotherapy. And it's a body-based approach. One powerful thing that modality does is it helps people overcome trauma. And another thing, and the way that modality can be helpful, is helping people identify what their self-limiting beliefs are. What are the beliefs that they've been carrying around from the time that they were young that continue to come up and be present in their lives and holds them back from being all that they can be.
Wow. We could go on, and we will go on, but to hit on a couple last points that I would feel remiss if we didn't, what would be something that your today's self would wish to say to your, pre-bat mitzvah, 11-year-old junior high school self?
Yeah, I think just touching on what we were talking about before, is you're so much more than your stuttering. It's sad to me when I look back and think about how much stuttering really filled my self-perception, fueled my self-perception. And I wish that I knew everything else that I was, because I think all of those things that I was describing to you as like a kid were actually still there. They were latent, they were dormant, but it was because I was really doing that kind of focus, right? I just put my hand up in front of my face to indicate those, like looking at the 4 fingers on my hands focus, as opposed to who is this whole person? Who am I? What kind of friend am I? Am I a creative, analytical kind of person, right? There was so much more to me at that time. And yeah, maybe I would just say like, you were so much more than your stuttering. And I want you to know that.
If you could offer something for parents or teachers or bosses,
Yeah.
what would be something you'd wish that people could put into practice? What would be a tip that would make a difference from your experience, but also as a professional to help people going through this?
So 2 things come to mind. One is the patience and understanding and really showing that child you are so much more than this, right? Like, what are you focusing on? What are you accentuating for that child? And let's give them a robust sense of who they are. And the second thing is show them that what they're saying matters, not how they're saying it. And you're listening to the content and you're paying attention and you're not going, oh, you were really smooth, right? And that takes the focus, that puts the focus on the speech as opposed to the content, which is what we want people to notice us for, what's going on inside.
Thank you so much. This has been unbelievable.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you've enjoyed this conversation.
I have.
You and anyone who's listening.
Yeah.
It's been like such a treat and everything and more than I could have wished for. So thank you for doing this and for being so open and vulnerable and also sharing such gems, real gems. A reflection.
Thank you.
Totally.
Yeah, this was such a pleasure for me, such a treat.
Thank you.
I so appreciate you and the work that you do and bringing all of this to the world. So
there's more to come. There's more we can do together, and we're always learning and evolving. Thanks to you and thanks to so many other teachers. And it reminds me of something that parents often ask is, how do I give my kid confidence? How do I help them have self-esteem? And I'm thinking of what Naomi said, and she said, I came back online. I asked Naomi, what were you like at 5? Full of spunk, class clown, friendly, open, energetic, and effervescent, connecting with people, bringing people into the circle. And then something happened. So I believe that kids are born with self-esteem. Kids are born with self-confidence and self-worth. We can do things to protect that, to put it in some veneer, to solidify it before something happens that takes it away from them. But kids don't need an injection or an introduction to self-esteem. They just need it to be protected and nurtured. And as adults, if you're asking yourself, well, I don't know what I was like when I was younger. I've been doing this facade for a very long time. Think about the things you really enjoy doing. Do you enjoy going to social events and being with people or playing team sports? Then you enjoy people, and you should enjoy the social connections that are waiting for you. Are you a person that enjoys curling up with a book? Maybe you're more towards the introvert, and maybe that's where your delight and your jam is going to be. Now, people can operate on every side of the spectrum, and somewhere in the middle, we all have a bit of both. But I think it's important to identify, who are you? What's your sphere of excellence? Where do you do best? And to make yourself comfortable in that space and be good enough everywhere else. So thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. This has been amazing.
Uri.
And it's just the beginning.
Thank you. Yes.
We're back online.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Excited for that.